Holly, I'm excited to talk about leadership. You've been doing a lot of leadership training, and I really believe today more than ever, it's just more complicated to deal with any just leadership. I mean, we have multiple generations, more diversity, which is wonderful in the workplace, different ages, everything, all mixing together right now.
Yeah, it's a real big challenge, Martin, for sure. But there are certain things that we can do and be aware of to become better leaders, to become more functional, and to provide a better service, not only to our organizations but to our teams.
Yeah, and before we start, would you just mention a little bit about your background? Because I've known you for many years, but not everyone here has.
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Holly Sullenger, and my company is Dr. Holly Speaks. And I have been doing corporate training and leadership consulting my entire adult life. I've actually run 5 different training centers. And I've actually then also worked with a bunch of companies from small to big. And right now, my clients tend to be very large organizations, and I do everything from data analytics with them to leadership consulting.
Leadership training is more important than ever, as we mentioned, because you have more generations in the workforce than I think ever before. And then there's wonderful commitments to having greater diversity, and you have greater diversity. And then we have more people internationally involved in America. And I really want to talk about where do you start, because you also have generations that didn't have some of the opportunities we had in training and leadership in our career. I spent 7 years in IBM and got a lot through that. And so you've got to be able to train multiple people in what does it mean to be a leader. And I thought we could start with what does that mean in management to be a leader?
That's a really good question. I think the first thing that we have to do is kind of define leadership, and leadership is different than management. Leadership, I feel the correct definition is empowering people to do their best, helping all of those around you want to strive to do their very best. So, of course, as a leader, you have to have the organizational goals at the back of your mind, and then you have to have team goals at the back of your mind. But literally, you also have to be aware of each individual, and each individual is going to have very different needs and bring very different things to the team. So leaders today, I think, in order to do a good job of leading, not just managing is kind of organizing people and getting things ticked off, but it doesn't involve going deeper. And I think that's what leadership is all about. And that's the biggest challenge. When people become leaders, they're no longer being asked to be experts in their technical fields or what have you. They're asked to help others become the very best that they can be. So people people problems and people challenges and people delights, that's your number one thing to do as a leader. So that has to
Yeah.
happen first.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I know that from the years at IBM, and it's there's a humorous statement that somehow popped in my head, and there's a job for every neuroses. And the truth of it is we want to get people in that spot where they are the best at performing. In fact, when I recommend job hunting, I say treat yourself like a product. Where's the best place for return on investment for you? So that's to me one of the keys is getting that lined up. Okay, what does John, Judy, or someone else have an aptitude for that I can move around and put in the best place? Because in a team project, there are so many aspects of them, and if they aren't there, where do we go? And then I have to mix that with their goals. What do they want to do? What's their personal ambition to go for? So I think these are so many aspects that have to be considered in leadership today.
No, you're absolutely right. One of the things that happens, I think, for most leaders is they inherit a team. Most leaders don't have the luxury of picking their teams. It was real easy when we were going out to recess in school and we could pick the athletes to be on our kickball team. That's not how it goes for leaders. Usually they inherit a team or they inherit most of the team. And one of the things that I find leaders often overlook, they know functionally what that person is supposed to do, but oftentimes they don't find out what that person really loves to do, what they're really passionate about. And over again, I find that when people are able to work to their passion, they contribute more. So, one of the questions I've been telling my leaders they really should ask their team members nowadays is, what is your superpower? And of course, all of my adults laugh and my leaders roll their eyes when I say that. And then I describe what I'm asking them to do. So, ask each of your team members, what is it that you're really good at? This is not a brag fest. This is just going to help the whole team function better. It's going to help me as a leader place you better. What are you really, really good at? What is the one thing that you do that if I ask other people, who do I need to go to for this? They'll go, this person, because they're so good at it. What makes you excited to get out of bed in the morning and go to work? What gets you jazzed? What evokes your passions? And that's your superpower. So I've had leaders, I challenge them, go back and ask your team members this and have a conversation about a whole meeting about it. Let everybody hear what everybody else is saying. And the leaders always come back to me and say, that was the coolest thing I have ever done with my team. I had no idea that so and so loves organization more than anything else, and Lord knows need help with organization. Or I never knew that so and so loves data analytics, and we need an analyst on our team. But unless you ask the person is sitting in front of you, what is it you really love to do? So oftentimes we overlook that.
I think part of this might be is uh, leaders just afraid of going into a personal space with somebody. I mean, there's so many things they have to be sensitive to today that I don't think they always had to when
Mhm.
I was at IBM. So I think that might be one of the resistance in going there is just the concern of maybe this is too personal to ask. And I think you're giving them permission. No, they can choose to not say it, and they can
Yeah.
choose to say skiing. When I get off work, skiing is it, or something else.
Or
Or
you can be more careful if you're a leader and you can say, what is it you're most passionate about that's work related? So in other words, I'm not asking you about your hobbies. I'm asking you about your work. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. And another thing that I've learned in coaching leaders is that people don't realize is leaders and people in management, often it'll be a manager doing a leadership role too, have a lot less freedom than you think. It's like as they go higher up the ladder, there's less freedom in speaking and operating than you realize because you've got people that want your job right maybe below you or are people parallel that don't want you in your job, and then you have to be careful because there's a ripple effect for everything you say that's bigger than when you're at the absolute entry level. Now, people entry level that want to go up need to pay attention to it, but this is something I think people aren't aware of if they haven't been in those roles that I really learned more when I was coaching executives than working with managers at IBM is how their world gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and there seems to be less freedom. And I think it's important for employees to have some compassion for that for leaders. And I think you'll benefit them by understanding look, your manager isn't just responding quickly because when they say something, it has a much bigger ripple effect than it might when you. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love what you said there at the end, especially. It's considered a sign of maturity when somebody asks a question. If you don't know right away, or if you want to ponder your response so it's the best possible one, it's considered a sign of maturity to say, "I'm going to need a few minutes to think about that," or even to the point where you say, "I need to kind of think about this overnight, and I'll come back to you tomorrow, and we'll discuss this," because leaders do have to be very careful about what they say. And it's to me, I think most leaders approach leader, I hope most leaders approach leadership from a servant leadership perspective, which means they're learning to put themselves last and their team is first. When the team hits a home run, the team gets the glory. When the team botches something, the leader is the person who is supposed to fall on the sword, not the team. So so leaders, unfortunately, they're out in front. They know that they're out in front, and they know that everything that they do is a responsibility to the team and to the organization. So I think that's why they have to be a little more cautious about how they respond. But I think if as long as they're keeping those things in mind, I think that they can. I think they can go for it.
Yeah, and this is also when working with them, I realize it's so important that they have something outside of work that is their support system. I mean, it might be golf, it might be, some activity, but they really need to have structures where it's safer for them to not have to manage every word or something. I mean, we all need to be careful because everyone has a smartphone and pay attention today. But I think this is even more important with the leader. So if it's a young leader coming up going, you may not be getting the recognition you want that you're accustomed to when you weren't a leader. In fact, someone I know that does consulting has talked to a lot of leaders and that are and managers in a company, and found one of the biggest things the youngers want is more acknowledgement from above. Well, those leaders probably grew up where they didn't get any acknowledgement that way, and they're not accustomed to giving it. So this is why, if you're going into this, I think it's real important that you've got some validation, if that's needed for you, outside of what's going on. Because you just said, if the team wins, if we work and you were the catalyst that did it as a leader, the team gets credit. And if there's a problem, it lands back on you. Well,
Mhm.
we also need to get young people to want to be leaders, because if you just said that, I'd go, I'm sorry, I don't want to be a leader. I mean, that's a recipe to not want it. So I think I'd like you to comment on that. And then let's talk about what are some of the benefits of it beyond just, I'm going to be the fall guy if it doesn't go wrong and everyone else gets credit.
That's a really good question. So I think first of all, you started out by mentioning, a good leader has other places that they can go to kind of vent themselves. All successful people, whether they're leaders or not, pay attention to their PTO. Study after study after study shows that when you take time off and you truly get away from your work, when you come back again, you are infinitely more creative and innovative because your brain has taken a breath, your brain has taken a break. So I try to encourage my leaders to showcase taking their personal time off so that their teams will do that as well. And that's going to make everybody fresher when they come back in. We are getting our butts kicked in the US by other countries that have way more PTO than we do. And they're starting to really ramp up their innovation and their creativity, and they're starting to take over what we've been able to do in the past. So that's number one important. But number two, from a leadership perspective, I have found that the really great leaders are the ones who thrill when their team does win and who thrill when they see people individually succeed. So they're not in it for themselves. And I think it's funny because I work with a lot of young leaders nowadays and they get that. They get the fact that it's not going to be about them, but it's going to be, they're going to have success when their team is successful. You definitely want to make sure that you are putting your team first, and your success is going to come from making sure that they're successful. And a lot of my younger people nowadays are realizing that the win in leadership is showing that you are a good leader. It's not you first about you, it's about you and the success of your team.
And that's probably something that people should screen for, at least look for, is, does someone cheer on other people when they succeed, or do they need extra attention? Doesn't mean they aren't a good employee, to be able to stay motivated. If you're going to pick a leader, that might be a quality to kind of look for on the team.
Well, and then the other thing I talk to people about, when you talk about having a pipeline of succession in a company, leadership's not the only pipeline. You can have experts who just want to be experts, and we don't want to punish them for that. If we have a really good engineer, let them be the best engineer on the planet and work for you. My gosh, why not? If you've got a really super good programmer, let them be a programmer. They don't want leadership, responsibilities. Good for them. And there needs to be, I've had people say, well, in my company, the only money is there for leaders. That's it. And that shouldn't be. You should have experts and leaders both able to continue to rise in monetary reward based on their own, contributions to the organization.
That's a great point. And that's something I remember in IBM, that, at a certain level, if you wanted to make more money, you had to become a manager, which had more leadership world. And then
Hmm.
if you were in that, back then it was more than 5 years, it might be 5 months now with the changing technology. you couldn't go down. And I had a manager that loved field service, but with demands of his family, he had to become a manager. And you could see he wasn't real happy about it, but it was the only career path to make more money. So I think that's important, that companies have kind of a career path that might look sideways or something. Or, like my stepson's a senior data scientist, and that led to, when he got there, a higher income. And he has no interest in managing people. He wants to be able to get the assignment, do the job, and really produce something that's elegant and quality. I mean, that's where his greatest joy comes from. And he gets along with people fine. He just doesn't want to do that. And he could probably even do it if he had to, but it's not his joy. It's not his strong
And that
suit.
should be fine. That
Yeah.
should be absolutely fine. We also find that not everybody is motivated by money. So, especially the younger generation, you were already talking about the different generations in the workplace. Believe it or not, there are five in the workplace now, soon to be six. And the younger generations have put their life work balance in front of their work life balance of the predecessors. So younger people have watched their parents work themselves to death and not have time to do what they need, what you're really trying to do in life. And they've said, we're not interested. We will work our tails off for 40 hours, but then we need to have time by ourselves. Or I had one young engineer, it was really interesting. He went to the senior engineers, and I mean, he was like their star catch for engineers. And he said, I have a new baby daughter, and I want to be able to come into work after I drop her off at daycare. I'll drop her off at like 7:30, and I'll come into work. And then I want to be able to work all day long, don't need to take a lunch until 3, and then I want to go pick her up from daycare. And I want to have time in the afternoon to play with my child. And after I put her down at night, she goes down fairly early, then I'll get back on the chuck wagon and I'll keep moving. I'll work as late as I need to at night, but I just want to be able to do that so that I can have my daughter in my life and I can watch her grow. And at that particular time, the senior leaders were all baby boomers,
Right. And
and they said, "What are you talking about?"
right. Yeah, we don't get it.
Mm-mm. And I had to talk with both sides, and I had to say to the senior leaders, "Are you willing to lose this guy? Because you're going to." And they were like, "No, we would never." I said, "No, you're going to lose him." So they finally came up with a compromise. But we have to understand that when we want good people around us, now we need to be able to listen to them. And as long as what they're doing does not tarnish what they're bringing to the table, we need to be willing to be flexible.
Yeah, that's it. Especially since so many people have learned to work from home.
Mhm.
I know, a number of people that go, I'm willing to take a lesser income for the ability to work at home. And I have no problem being held accountable for results. I mean,
Yep.
I said, what about results? I have no problem being held accountable for results. In fact, I want a clear marker of what is results, so I
Yeah.
know that I'm doing it, but I want the flexibility of working from home. And I think that opened a world for a lot of people, not just younger people, to go, wait a second, this is something doable. I mean, you've said you worked in an office for many years doing similar stuff, and now a lot of your trainings from home or on site with them,
Hmm.
on from home or on site with them, and really enjoy it. You have your own, we talk about your own little spaces. There's the office space, the relaxation space. I love that. I do too. This is
Yep.
my home studio. But I enjoy being in front of people. That's
Hmm.
important in my mix. And
Yep.
others
Same here.
can go either way. And I think this is something else they need to keep in mind in, do we want results with the best people, or do we want it to look a certain way? And I think that's something you're bringing up from management as well, to understand this is where they're probably going to have to adjust and pay attention to it along the way. Now, you mentioned multiple generations. Would you break down some of those, because people aren't as clear? It's quite a distinction, and I love meeting young people that want to have their own business and entrepreneurship, and then I just chatted with the younger politician that's a family man, and he's working, and said, I want to volunteer and give you some help, to be reaching more people. But it's very exciting to me when I see that occurring. Would you talk about some of the different generations and anything unique? I mean, obviously, one size doesn't fit all. So really pay attention to the individual first. Don't use a pattern matching on them. But I
Right.
think it'd be useful to at least go over the general.
Yeah, I always tell people you got to be careful not to stereotype because there are some people that, even though they were technically born in one generation, they act more like another one. But what we're doing is we're painting broad strokes, not to stereotype or label people, but to enable us to understand them. And so the different generations were actually coined by psychologists, sociologists, and the media, believe it or not. And they name a new generation when that generation is doing things very different than the preceding one. So there's no magic number. It's not like every 10 years we get a new name. That doesn't happen. But we have the traditionalists who should all be retired by now. They're in their 70s. But there are, because of the advances in medicine and because of the fact that a lot of pensions were taken away from people through folding companies, et cetera. There are some people who choose to work long or have to work long because they can't afford to retire, and they're still in the workplace. And their whole view of the workspace, they're very loyal, they're very patriotic, family is important to them, religion is important to them. I mean, they have a whole series of values, but they're fiercely loyal. These are the people that thought they'd be born, go to work, and stay there until they died, and they've had the rug pulled out from under them usually, and they've had to work many different places. So that's the traditionals. And then of course we have the boomers, and the boomers are at the top of the food chain in a lot of organizations. And the boomers were so numerous for so long, they had to learn to be very collaborative. They're still very loyal to their companies, and their careers are the signature of their worth. They feel like if they work hard, they can achieve anything. They also have the most difficult time with work life balance because they overwork themselves. They work 20% more hours than anybody else. So that's the boomers. Also, the boomers were the first generation that figured out that when you graduate with a 4-year degree now, it's only going to last you about 5 years in business and industry. And so they came up with the idea of continuing professional education, which, as you know, Martin, it keeps you and I alive. So that's that's an important distinction. Gen Xers were the very first generation that had latchkey kids. Birth control came along during the day and age of the boomers. And because of that, women went into the workplace and they had fewer children. And they decided they no longer needed to stay with men that they didn't feel were cutting the mustard. So they had, they went into the workplace and the kids ended up going home on their own. Call me when you get home. Um, because of that, Gen Xers are very entrepreneurial and very independent, and they make really tight friend bonds. That's their makeshift family, if you will. And then after that, of course, we have the millennials. And by the way, every generation feels that the next generation is just a bunch of rugrats and charlatans and can't do anything right. And every generation ends up being phenomenal. So we have to understand that all of these differences, when pulled together, make the best possible team and the best possible workplace. So millennials, they're very technologically oriented. They believe very much in life work balance rather than work life balance. They're after what they can do in life. Both the Xers and the millennials oftentimes are sandwiched between children and aging parents. And because of that, Xers and millennials want to have a very flexible workspace so that they can take time off to take mom to the doctor or take the kids into the pediatrician. So that's the millennials. And then Gen Zs are the young ones right now for a little while. And Gen Zs are even more numerous than the Gen Ys, the millennials. And they are super technology oriented. But this is interesting. They like face to face. So the really, really young ones want to be able to at least do hybrid work so they see people some of the time. And but I have seen this in my own work. When I ran the division that you and I know each other from at State, I had interns that worked for me, and they were millennials, and they loved being mentored, and they loved to mentor. I'd hook them up with somebody, and they'd say, "This is how the politics go," and the millennial would say, "And this is how you want to do your computer stuff." So they have give and take. It's really nice. Gen Zs also want the same opportunity. They want to be able to come in and shadow someone. They want to be able to have internships, and they want to be mentored. And I've noticed that for every single generation, if we could have the perfect team, it would have every personality possible on it, every ethnicity possible on it, and definitely every generation possible on it. And if we had that mixture, we'd have the most creative, innovative team imaginable.
That's really fun. Uh, Anything about dealing with different cultures, ethnics, anything in that? Because that's another complicated. I mean,
It
as
is.
someone who's had a chance to travel in the world and realize, wow, this is a different paradigm this person comes from visiting Egypt to going to Japan. I'm so blessed that I had some time out of the United States where I could really sit down and go, wow, it's like a whole different filter that's on their mind of seeing things and interacting with them. And you really have to get that each person is like um, a unique thumbprint. And then they're also influenced by their past. But I still like looking at them as a unique thumbprint, a unique pattern, not fitting into a group. That's why I'm not a real big advocate of a lot of the Myers Briggs and tools because they can be used. I saw it more in IBM as a tool of beating people up than actually serving them. Just like, listen, who's in front of me now? If this is a unique human being, what's important? What's their values that they're letting me know? Is still my approach.
Oh, you act that way in throughout your life, Martin. So you've actually incorporated that one really well. Yeah, no, definitely. It's I do also do training courses on cultural sensitivity. And the one thing I've found across all, I don't care what their personality is, what their generation is, what their culture is, but if you ask questions and then really listen,
Yeah,
if you ask them, what would work best for you, or how would you like this to come across to you, or how would you like us best to connect next time? That works with the generations also. Millennials and Gen Zs prefer to text initially, and then if they feel like it, then they'll talk to you. And then the opposite generations do just they take just a different approach entirely. But ask, and if you're true as a leader, if your true um, desire is to understand so that you can promote others and help the team have a harmonious amount of success, right? Then you're going to need to ask questions and listen and model that so they'll do the same with each other. Communication has to be at the top.
that's fantastic. I agree entirely. I really uh, it's also so much more fun because it's like you're going on a little journey learning about another person's perspective. And it's really important you're listening in a non-judging mode. Not that we don't need judging in skills in business, but in this one it's really kind of like a curiosity, like a scientist discovering something amazing. They just and listen for it is, I think, such an important piece. In fact, somebody in our community said, you have the most diverse friends of any human I ever met. And I thought, well, I could do better, but thank you for the compliment, in my
And
own
well,
value of it. Yeah.
that's a huge compliment. And if every company took on the same attitude that you have and every team did, we'd have better companies and better teams.
Yeah, yeah, I really enjoy it. In fact, I was just teaching the other night, and the director there is bilingual, and I was so excited that we could have him in Spanish ask ChatGPT questions and give me evaluation. Is the nuance correct? Because he's a trained lawyer in both uh, Mexico and in America, but
Wow.
he's doing small business advising and work and it was so fun. It was like, now I want to find another language and test this out as well.
Oh, that sounds like a great, great time for sure. Yeah.
Next question is, if someone wants to build their leadership skills, let's talk about some advice. They're listening to this, they want to hone, or they might be put into a leadership position and it's their job. And it's like you said, they're usually dropped into a team they didn't pick. What's your advice in building those skills?
So I advise leaders are so busy to begin with. They have very little time to do a lot, right? Of extra things. But I always tell them try every day to do one thing that's going to make you a better leader than you were the day before. Just every day, try to pick one thing that you can do. Maybe today you're going to close your mouth and listen more. Maybe that's what you're going to do today. Maybe tomorrow you're going to read an article on the different generations in the workplace and try to figure out how you can reach more of the people on your team. Maybe the day after that, you pick up a book and read a chapter. I try, the most successful people in business and industry read a lot, whether it's online, or an actual book or magazine or something from the library, they read. So find a short article that has to do with maybe, how to be a better coach as a leader. Just pick a topic that you think might be of benefit to your team. And interestingly enough, one of the things I love it when my organizations do 360-degree reviews. So not only is the leader evaluating their team, but the team also evaluates the leader. If the leader gets some feedback on that and they say, oh, don't feel like I'm heard, fine, then I need to learn to listen better. Make that a plan, make that an action plan for yourself. Or, if your team says, I really enjoy this person, but I wish they would push me more. Well, maybe you need to learn how to be a little bit more of a coach and a little bit more aggressive with the goal setting that you're doing for individuals. So you can listen and get feedback, and then you can work just a little bit each day on how you can make yourself better. I work with companies, Martin. They have me come in and I do what's called a leadership academy. And we just do a deep dive into the different leadership topics of the day. And I think I have now 24 topics that we talk about, if they do the whole leadership academy. And it's not me teaching them, it's us all talking. It's a conversation of leaders amongst leaders, learning from each other and discussing the latest trends and what's going on today.
I think that's excellent advice because there's one of the things in leadership is important is to really understand where you need to be flexible and where you need to hold the ground as a boundary.
Hmm.
And sometimes people weren't fortunate enough to have upbringing where boundaries were set clearly, so it's a
Hmm.
little harder, it's tougher for them to learn. But I've seen amazing accomplishments when people are committed to learn where they may have had no opportunity before to learn that and then learn it later in life. And I was actually my best friend in Japan. He didn't have this, but his nickname in college was Slack. He was so bright that he would like generally be more relaxed in doing things and make an effort if it was really needed. And then he went to Japan where you couldn't be late, you had to be extremely punctual, and it just changed his life. And I think we both agree to the better. Now the essence of him's
Nice.
still there, but now when you need to be somewhere, and it wasn't that he was not in integrity. It was just like, well, Rick will get here when he gets here. Well, now he's in a world where there's no tolerance for that.
Yeah.
And I've known him since then and seen how he's grown, how that, and now he's in a leader role in his university, mentoring people, and he's apparently one of the most asked for mentors. Like if in the university you can pick a mentor that works and coaches you. So I think
Oh, that's awesome.
this is it is a wonderful field. It is great, but you need to know the anatomy of it. It's going to be about the team. It's going to be about how do you handle it if it doesn't go wrong, where you're learning from the mistake and working with it, but you aren't beating yourself up so much you can't operate. In fact, I'm remembering at IBM, one of my passions was going into customers that were yelling and upset because I was trying to learn applying Aikido to conflict. I thought, what a great way to practice. And someone from upstate New York wanted to meet me for the customer engineer that liked being yelled at, I was called. And the truth is if I went in and said, I represent IBM, I want to apologize for the problem you're having. Please tell them to me. And if they were yelling at me, I realized they had nothing to do with me. The power I gained from that was extraordinary by that just really listening to what's going on. So there wasn't me over here to be offended. And I'm so
Right.
grateful for that skill I developed. It's got to be useful as leaders too.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really important idea there, and that's the idea if there are young leaders out there and they're interested in honing their leadership skills, before they take on the full reign, right? What they can do is find people like yourself and say, "Will you be my mentor? Can I job shadow you?" Um, I have never heard of somebody saying, nobody's ever said to me, the person I asked said no. They might say, "Oh, I don't have a lot of time, but I can only see you every other month." That's fine, but at least they're offering to help. People that are in good leadership roles now don't forget what it was like to learn, and they're very eager to reach back and help somebody else move forward. So, always asking somebody around you if they can have a little bit of your time, if you can watch what they're doing, if they can explain why they did something or how they got to a certain decision, that's a really good thing to do. So, somebody who's, for example, like what you were just talking about, learned, that when somebody's coming at you, it's not about you. That's something that leaders learn over time. But a mentor or somebody that you're, talking with on a regular basis can shorten the amount of time it takes you to learn that.
I'm smiling because the joke I say is when they're really upset, you're not that powerful. They brought some other issue with them.
And that's for sure. A lot of times you don't realize, I mean, you know, they may just have had a really bad interaction with somebody else and you happen to be the next person on their path.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've covered a lot of great topics on leadership. Is there anything else you think is something we should explore on this? Because we topic the diversity is important, listening to them. What does it mean? How it's distinct from management and understand they're not the same.
Mhm.
And just realize it's a you're probably not going to get the team you chose. You may be able to refine that, but it could take a while to get there.
And also don't ever expect that everybody's going to be want to be a leader, because that's not the case. So I say to my leaders the same thing I say to any of the people that I work with, and that is, if we just make one little tiny step better than we did the day before, by the time we get to the end of a year, we'll have made 365 positive steps. So you're going to be a completely different person. So when you're a leader, just try to do something a little bit better than you did the day before. Find out something and do it.
That's wonderful. Well, Dr. Holly Sullenger, what how can they learn more about you and find out? I'll put the links below as well, but if you just share that.
Yeah, I'm again at drhollyspeaks@gmail.com, and it's www.drhollyspeaks.com. And I actually have clients all around the globe now. So I do some training in person, I do a lot of training virtually.
That's wonderful. It's so exciting. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate it.